the Polyverse presents a series on literary cliches. Today's episode, The Mary Sue. In movies and books, and let's face it, anywhere there is a story, many of these story makers make use of certain cliches in order to quickly establish some kind of rapport with the audience and make sure that they understand the stakes that is going on within the story. Some of these cliches, however, can make the audience feel like the studio itself is not taking them seriously, and or otherwise make halfway decent film into crap. Today, we're going to look at The Mary Sue. But first, before we begin, you can subscribe to be notified whenever we put out more great content, and comment below if you have any more ideas on cliches in literature. The Mary Sue is one of the more insulting cliches that is out there. And believe it or not, it came from the anachronistic realm of fan fiction, as a lot of things do. As Wikipedia says, a Mary Sue is an idealized and seemingly perfect character. Often, this character is recognized as an author insert or some form of wish fulfillment. They can usually perform better at tasks, generally everything, be better than everyone or what have you, than should be possible, given the amount of training or experience that they would have legitimately been able to gain up to that point. And they are usually able to, through some means, upstage the main protagonist of the story, such as saving the hero or the day when the hero was unable to do the same. The negative connotation we have comes from this wish fulfillment implication. The Mary Sue is judged as a poorly developed character, too perfect and lacking in any sort of realism to be interesting. In fact, in chapter 4 of her book Enterprising Women, Camille Bacon-Smith states that the fear of creating a Mary Sue may be restricting and even silencing some writers in some respects, as they do not want to be accused of creating a Mary Sue. In some cases, however, a Mary or masculine Marty Sue is useful. For example, if you don't want to do a backstory or a creation, like in many superhero movies, we don't need to know the exact origin to know that the superhero is a superhero. That's why we're watching the movie. And this is also the case with the series of John Wick. Though in such cases, it is established that the character has a past that we are not seeing, and that the studio, the story, the movie, is skipping over that to the interesting part of their lives. In the case of John Wick, it is flat out said by many of the other characters that he is a trained assassin and not some random schmo. He has trained for years to get to the position that he is in. Some writers also like to show a perfect person so that later on they can have them fall, introducing flaws that might not readily be visible but lurk somewhere below as a commentary on some aspect of life that they are writing about. And when problems arise for this character or composite they represent, they might create an interesting story and show some relevancy to their story, or create this commentary so that some kind of change can be made if that is the motivation behind the story. And in some cases, a writer may also be trying to establish an audience in the first place with the intention of humanizing the Mary or Marty Sue later on so that people will be willing to watch the stories. In some ways it works, in some ways it doesn't. It just depends on how it is done. The first usage of this concept, the term itself being applied later on to call back to it, was, like I said, in fan fiction. In this case, Star Trek. In a Star Trek fan magazine published by Paula Smith in 1973, more specifically in, I believe, the third magazine, in a story entitled A Trekkie's Tale, Lieutenant Mary Sue, the youngest lieutenant in the fleet at just 15 and a half years old, by chance takes over the starship and hyperbolically saves the galaxy better and faster than Kirk ever could. Basically, she was too talented and too smart to actually exist. Now, some have argued that Kirk and Spock and other heroes and heroines of the era were Mary or Marty Sues in and of themselves. But such a thing was common, as after all, Why would you want to watch a show about the most incredibly average crew of Starfleet? Of course, during that time, women did not usually get the same treatment. In fact, they were usually relegated to other types of roles, or perhaps being more expected to be like Lucy Ricardo of I Love Lucy, who is quite frankly a klutz, and if I'm honest, a class of character I really think is worse than Mary Sue. But at least she wasn't painfully average. In the end, everything that is done by a studio, by a writer, by a producer, by all of the staff is to make money. In the end, most stories are products of their time, and when you don't know better, it's not necessarily that bad. And as times change, so too do the stories that are made. And like all cliches, they started somewhere and continue, because in some perhaps broken ways, continue to pay the bills. Additionally, some have argued that Rey of Star Wars is not necessarily a Mary Sue, that any undue skill she could have attained could be explained away by being a junk farmer on the edge of nowhere. Without some level of skill, she simply would not have been able to survive. And besides, the Force itself is a plot hole device, and it does move in mysterious ways. I have to say though, repairing a speeder is not the same thing as flying a spaceship through cramped corridors, and brawling is not fighting. One cannot learn to fight, especially with a dangerous weapon, a weapon that could be even more dangerous to the user than to the enemy, without some kind of instructor, and Rey was ostensibly a loner, avoiding as much communication and contact with the outside world as she could, while she waited for her family to return. I'm not here to argue that point. In this case, she is just an example of the concept. And like I said, we use cliches and the like for a reason. And like it or not, they will continue to be part of our lives, as there's only so many combinations that are possible, and you have to make things short enough to be interesting, but long enough to actually tell a story. And cliches are shortcuts. And without them, you would have to invest a lot of time in any work of fiction in order to gain any relevance out of it. That's why novels of more than 1,000 pages don't get that popular, and short stories and videos can become viral. Now, I really hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you did, you can like, share, comment, subscribe, and tell us about more cliches that you would like to have explained, or any comments about the channel. After all, nothing gets better without feedback. Have a great day.